Baby saw a German shepherd dragging himself near the marketplace. What happened next left everyone in tears. The screaming started at 9:47 on a Saturday morning. Not the kind of screaming that makes people run away, but the kind that makes them stop everything and look. 5-year-old Tommy Chen stood frozen in the middle of the crowded marketplace, pointing at something nobody else had noticed yet. What he saw would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone who witnessed what happened next. Before we continue this incredible story, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from right now. Tommy's small finger trembled as he pointed toward the gap between two vendor stalls. His mother, Sarah, was haggling over tomatoes with Mrs. Rodriguez, completely unaware that her son had just spotted something that would haunt them both forever. The German shepherd was dragging himself forward using only his front legs, leaving a trail of blood and dirt behind him. His back legs weren't working at all. They just dragged uselessly across the rough concrete like broken branches. "Mama!" Tommy's voice cracked. "Mama, look!" Sarah turned, ready to tell Tommy to wait just one more minute. The words died in her throat. The dog's eyes weren't looking at the crowd gathering around him. They were locked directly on Tommy's face, as if the animal had been searching specifically for this one small boy in a sea of strangers. The marketplace erupted into chaos. Some people stepped back in fear. Others pulled out their phones. A few vendors shouted about calling animal control. But Tommy did something nobody expected. He walked straight toward the injured dog, his tiny sneakers making soft sounds against the pavement. "Tommy, no!" Sarah dropped her shopping bag, tomatoes rolling everywhere. That dog could be dangerous. The German shepherd's tail moved slightly. Not quite a wag, but something close to it. His breathing was labored, each exhale creating small clouds of dust near his nose. The fur around his hindquarters was matted with something dark that Sarah didn't want to identify. This dog had been through hell, and somehow he was still moving. Mr. Patel, who ran the fruit stand nearest to where the dog had appeared, stepped forward with his hands raised. "This dog, he comes here before," he said, his accent thick with worry. "3 days now. Always he disappears when we try to help. But today," he shook his head. "Today, he cannot run anymore." Tommy knelt down 3 feet from the dog. Sarah lunged forward to grab him, but something in her son's expression stopped her. The boy's face had changed. Gone was the playful 5-year-old who had been begging for candy just minutes ago. In his place sat a child with eyes that seemed decades older. "His name is Ranger," Tommy whispered. Sarah's blood went cold. "How could you possibly know that?" Tommy didn't answer. He was too busy extending his small hand toward the dog's nose. Ranger sniffed once, twice, then did something that made the entire crowd gasp. He started crawling forward again, not away from the boy, but towards something behind him. Every movement looked agonizing. His front paws scraped against the concrete, nails clicking and breaking. A woman in the crowd started crying. "He wants to show us something," Tommy said, standing up. "We have to follow him." The crowd parted as the injured German shepherd dragged himself between the vendor stalls toward a narrow alley that most people didn't even know existed. Tommy walked beside him, matching the dog's painfully slow pace. Sarah followed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind them, at least 30 people formed a strange procession, their Saturday shopping forgotten. The alley smelled like rotting vegetables and old rain. Ranger pulled himself behind a dumpster, then collapsed, his chest heaving. Tommy got on his hands and knees, peering into the shadows where the dog was looking. "Oh my God," Tommy breathed, then louder, "Mama, come look! Hurry!" Sarah crouched beside her son, using her phone's flashlight to illuminate the darkness. What she saw made her stumble backward, her hand flying to her mouth. 3 tiny puppies, maybe 2 weeks old, were huddled in a makeshift nest of newspapers and torn fabric. Their eyes were barely open, and they were crying weakly, their little bodies shaking. Ranger had dragged his broken body to the marketplace, not to beg for help for himself, but to find someone who would save his babies. "He's been feeding them," an older woman in the crowd whispered. "Look at how thin he is. He's been giving them everything." Tommy was already reaching for the puppies, but Sarah caught his wrist. "Honey, we need to call someone. A vet, the police, someone who knows what to do." No time, Tommy said, and his voice had that strange quality again, like he was receiving information from somewhere else. The white one isn't breathing right. She needs help now. Sure enough, when Sarah looked closer, she could see that one of the puppies, a tiny white and brown female, was barely moving. Her little chest stuttered with each breath. Mr. Patel was already on his phone. My niece, she is veterinarian, Dr. Emily Foster. She comes right away. He spoke rapidly in Hindi, then hung up. 10 minutes. She says bring them to her clinic. But Ranger wasn't moving anymore. The German Shepherd lay on his side, his eyes still open but unfocused. Tommy placed his small hand on the dog's head, and something passed between them that nobody else could see or understand. He's dying, Tommy said simply. He used all his strength to get here, to make sure someone would find them. No, Sarah said firmly, surprising herself with the force of her conviction. We're not letting him die. Not after this. The crowd mobilized with stunning efficiency. Someone brought a wooden board from a nearby construction site. 4 men carefully lifted Ranger onto it while Tommy held the puppies against his chest, their tiny bodies fitting perfectly in his small arms. The procession moved through the marketplace like a funeral parade, except instead of mourning, there was determination in every face. Dr. Emily Foster was waiting outside her clinic when they arrived. She was young, maybe 30, with kind eyes that turned serious the moment she saw Ranger's condition. Inside, quickly, she commanded, holding the door open. The clinic's waiting room filled with people from the marketplace. They sat in silence, strangers united by what they had witnessed. Tommy refused to leave Ranger's side as doctor. Foster began her examination. Sarah watched her son whisper continuously to the dog, words too quiet for anyone else to hear. Spinal injury, doctor, Foster announced after 10 minutes of careful examination. Hit by a car, I'd guess, maybe 2 weeks ago. The fact that he's alive at all is... She shook her head. It's miraculous, but his spine is severely damaged. The paralysis in his hind legs is complete. Can you fix him? Tommy asked. Dr. Foster's expression was grim. Surgery might be possible, but it would be expensive, very expensive. And even then, I can't guarantee he'd walk again. The damage is extensive. How expensive? Sarah heard herself asking. $15,000 minimum, maybe more depending on what we find once we operate. The waiting room fell silent. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She was a single mother working 2 jobs. $15,000 might as well have been $1 million, but Tommy wasn't listening to the adults anymore. He had moved to where Dr. Foster had placed the puppies in an incubator, the white one hooked to a tiny oxygen tube. His hand was pressed against the glass, and his lips were moving. What are you doing, honey? Sarah asked. Ranger is telling me their names, Tommy said matter-of-factly. The white one is Snow. The brown one is Mud. The black one is Shadow. Dr. Foster exchanged a concerned look with Sarah. Tommy, dogs can't actually talk. He's not talking with words, Tommy interrupted, his tone patient, like he was explaining something obvious to adults who just didn't understand. He's showing me pictures in my head. He's showing me what happened. Sarah knelt beside her son. What happened, baby? What is Ranger showing you? Tommy's eyes filled with tears. A man in a blue truck hit him on purpose. Ranger was trying to protect the puppies. The man was trying to take them. He wanted to sell them, but they were too young to leave their mama. But their mama... Tommy paused, his little face scrunching in concentration. Their mama died having them. Ranger isn't their real daddy, but he found them and decided to protect them. The room was so quiet you could hear the puppies' tiny breaths through the incubator's hum. That's quite an imagination, Doctor, Foster said gently, but Tommy shook his head. It's not imagination. I can see it. The man had a tattoo on his neck, a snake eating its own tail. His truck had a dent on the front right side. License plate started with K7. Tommy's voice was steady, certain. Ranger remembers everything. Sarah's hands were shaking. Her son had always been sensitive, maybe a little different from other kids, but this was something else entirely. Tommy, how long have you been able to do this? Tommy shrugged. Since forever. But it's stronger with Ranger. Like, he knows how to show me things better than other animals. Dr. Foster had her phone out, typing rapidly. There was a report, she said slowly, about illegal puppy mills in the area. The police have been looking for... She showed her screen to Sarah. A blurry security photo showed a man with a neck tattoo next to a blue truck. This man, Victor Dalton. The waiting room erupted in whispers. Someone said they should call the police. Another person started a collection, passing around a baseball cap for donations to Ranger's surgery. Bills and coins clinked into the hat as it made its way around the room, but Tommy wasn't paying attention to any of it. He was back at Ranger's side, where Dr. Foster had the dog on an examination table, an IV drip already attached to his leg. The German Shepherd's eyes were closed, but his chest still rose and fell. "He says thank you," Tommy whispered. "He says he can finally rest because he knows the puppies are safe." "Don't let him rest too long," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "Tell him he needs to fight. Tell him we're going to help him." Tommy nodded, his small hand stroking Ranger's matted fur. "He says he's tired. He's been fighting for so long." Dr. Foster checked the collection hat. "There's almost $3,000 here already," she announced, amazement in her voice. "It's a start, but—" The clinic door burst open. A man in a rumpled suit rushed in, camera crew behind him. "Is this where the miracle dog is? The one who saved the puppies?" Sarah immediately stepped between the cameras and Tommy. "No interviews. He's just a child." But the reporter, whose name tag read Derek Chen, wasn't looking at Tommy. He was staring at Ranger with something like recognition. "Oh my God," he breathed. "I know this dog." Everyone turned to stare at him. 3 weeks ago, I did a story about a German Shepherd who saved a homeless man from a fire. The dog dragged him out of a burning building, then disappeared before anyone could catch him. The man said the dog had been living on the streets, protecting homeless people in the area. Derek pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos. "Look, same markings, same collar." He showed them a blurry photo of a German Shepherd dragging an unconscious man from a smoking building. Even through the smoke and poor quality, it was clearly Ranger. "This dog is a hero," Derek said, multiple times over. He turned to his camera crew. "We're going live. This story needs to be told." Sarah wanted to protest, but Tommy tugged on her shirt. "Let them, Mama. Ranger needs help, and maybe people will help if they know how good he is." Within an hour, the story had exploded across social media. The marketplace rescue, the puppies, the homeless man, all of it painted a picture of a dog who had spent his life saving others, even after being paralyzed. Donations started pouring into the clinic's website, which Dr. Foster had hastily updated with Ranger's story. But in the examination room, things were taking a dark turn. Ranger's breathing had become labored. Dr. Foster worked frantically, checking his vitals, adjusting medications. "He's going into shock," she announced. "The trauma is catching up with him. We need to operate now, or we're going to lose him." "But we don't have enough money yet," Sarah protested. Dr. Foster was already preparing for surgery. "I don't care about the money. This dog deserves a chance." As they wheeled Ranger toward the operating room, Tommy suddenly grabbed Dr. Foster's arm. "Wait," he said urgently. "Ranger wants to see the puppies one more time." Dr. Foster hesitated, then nodded. She brought the incubator closer to the operating table. Ranger's eyes opened slightly, focusing on the 3 tiny lives he had saved. His tail moved once, weakly. "He says to tell Snow to be brave," Tommy translated, tears streaming down his face. "Tell Mud to be strong. Tell Shadow to protect the others." Then Ranger's eyes closed, and they wheeled him into surgery. The waiting room had filled with more people, some from the marketplace, others who had seen the story online and came to show support. Sarah held Tommy on her lap, feeling him tremble against her. "What if he dies, Mama?" Tommy whispered. Sarah didn't have an answer. She just held him tighter. 2 hours passed, then 3. Dr. Foster's assistant came out periodically with updates. The surgery was complicated. There was more damage than expected. They were doing everything they could. Tommy hadn't moved from his chair, his eyes fixed on the surgery door. Occasionally, he would whisper something that made Sarah's skin prickle. "He's floating above his body," Tommy said at one point. "He can see, Doctor. Foster working. He says she has kind hands." Sarah wanted to tell him it was his imagination, but the certainty in his voice stopped her. Whatever was happening with her son, whether it was real or not, it was keeping him calm. Then, at hour 4, Tommy suddenly stood up. "No," he said loudly. "No, Ranger, don't go." The waiting room fell silent. Everyone stared at the 5-year-old boy who was looking at something none of them could see. "Come back," Tommy shouted. "The puppies need you. I need you, please." The surgery door opened. Dr. Foster stood there, exhaustion written across her face. Sarah's heart stopped. "He crashed, doctor," Foster said. "His heart stopped for almost 2 minutes, but—" She smiled weakly. "He's back. He's stable." The surgery was successful. The waiting room erupted in cheers. Tommy collapsed against his mother, sobbing with relief. "Can I see him?" Tommy asked. "He's still under anesthesia, doctor," Foster explained. "But you can sit with him while he wakes up." In the recovery room, Ranger lay still, his body wrapped in bandages, machines beeping steadily around him. Tommy sat in a chair pulled close to the table, his small hand resting on Ranger's paw. "I heard you," Tommy whispered, "when you were floating. You said you saw a light, but you came back." "Why?" Sarah, standing in the doorway with Doctor Foster, felt a chill run down her spine. "What's happening with my son?" she asked quietly. Dr. Foster was checking Ranger's monitors, but her expression was thoughtful. "I've been a vet for 8 years, she said. "I've seen bonds between humans and animals that science can't explain, but this—" She shook her head. "Your son has something special, something rare." "Is it real?" Sarah asked. "Can he really communicate with Ranger?" Dr. Foster pointed to one of the monitors. "Ranger's heart rate changes when Tommy talks. It calms when Tommy touches him. During surgery, when Tommy shouted for him to come back, Ranger's heart started beating again. I don't know if it's telepathy or empathy or something else entirely, but the connection is real." As if to prove her point, Ranger's eyes fluttered open. The first thing he did was look for Tommy. "Hi," Tommy said simply. "You made it." Ranger's tail moved slightly under the blankets. "The puppies are okay," Tommy continued. "Snow is breathing better. They're all going to make it, just like you." Over the next few hours, as news of Ranger's successful surgery spread, something extraordinary began happening. People started arriving at the clinic with stories about Ranger. The homeless man he had saved from the fire came, still bearing burn scars on his arms. A woman brought her daughter, explaining how Ranger had stood between them and an aggressive dog at the park months ago. A teenage boy told how Ranger had barked until someone noticed he had fallen into a drainage ditch with a broken leg. Each story painted the same picture: a dog who had spent his life protecting others, asking for nothing in return. Detective Marcus Webb arrived as the sun was setting. He was a tall man with tired eyes and a notebook that looked like it had seen better days. "I'm investigating Victor Dalton," he said, showing his badge to Sarah. "I understand your son might have information about him." Sarah hesitated, not sure how to explain Tommy's abilities to a police detective, but Tommy spoke up from where he sat beside Ranger. "The blue truck is parked at a warehouse," Tommy said, his eyes unfocused, like he was seeing something far away. "Near the river? There's a red door on the side. Ranger can smell fish and something chemical, like the stuff Doctor Foster uses to clean." Detective Webb wrote everything down, his expression skeptical but professional. "How does he know this?" "Ranger showed me," Tommy said simply. "He escaped from there. That's where the bad man keeps the dogs." "Dogs?" Detective Webb leaned forward. "What dogs?" Tommy's face scrunched in concentration. "Lots of dogs. In cages. They're sick and scared. Some are mothers with puppies that are too young to be sold. The man takes the puppies anyway." The detective's skepticism was visibly wavering. The details were too specific, too consistent with what they had suspected about Dalton's operation. "Can you see anything else?" Detective Webb asked carefully. "Anything that might help us find this warehouse?" Tommy closed his eyes, his hand tightening on Ranger's paw. "There's a sign next door. Blue with white letters. Something about boats. Riverside Boat Repair." Detective Webb stood up abruptly, pulling out his phone. He stepped outside to make a call, but Sarah could see him through the window, gesturing animatedly. Dr. Foster was checking Ranger's bandages when she noticed something odd. "His legs," she said suddenly. "Look at his legs." Everyone gathered around the table. Ranger's back legs, which had been completely paralyzed, were twitching slightly. "That's impossible, Doctor." Foster breathed. "The spinal damage was complete. He shouldn't have any sensation at all." But Tommy was smiling. He says he can feel them. Just a little, like pins and needles. Dr. Foster ran test after test, each one confirming what seemed impossible. Ranger was regaining sensation in his paralyzed legs. It was minimal, barely detectable, but it was there. "This doesn't happen, Doctor," Foster kept saying. "Medically, this doesn't happen." Detective Webb returned, his face grim but determined. "We found the warehouse. Exactly where your son said it would be. We're organizing a raid for tonight." He looked at Tommy with something approaching awe. "We've been looking for this place for months. How did he know?" Sarah pulled Tommy closer. "My son has a gift," she said simply, surprising herself with how easily she accepted it now. "He and Ranger, they're connected somehow." The detective nodded slowly. "We're going to need his help. If there are dogs in there, they're probably traumatized. We'll need someone who can calm them." "Absolutely not," Sarah said immediately. "He's 5 years old. I'm not letting him near a criminal operation." But Tommy was already shaking his head. "Mama, I have to go. Ranger is showing me. There's a puppy there, a little female pit bull. She's very sick. If we don't get her tonight, she'll die." "How can you know that?" Sarah asked, though she was already beginning to believe. Tommy's eyes were filled with tears. "Because Ranger tried to save her before he got hit by the truck. She was the reason he was there. He heard her crying and tried to get her out, but the bad man caught him, and—" Tommy stopped, his small body shaking. "And that's when he hurt Ranger's back." The room fell silent. Even Detective Webb looked shaken. "We'll keep him safe," the detective promised. "He won't go inside until we've secured the building. But if he can really communicate with these animals, he could save lives." Sarah wanted to say no. Every maternal instinct screamed against putting her child in danger. But looking at Tommy's determined face, and at Ranger struggling to lift his head to look at them, she knew this was bigger than her fears. "Okay," she whispered, "but I'm coming too." As they prepared for the raid, Dr. Foster worked to stabilize Ranger enough that he could be left with her assistant. The German Shepherd seemed agitated, whining softly whenever Tommy moved too far away. "He wants to come," Tommy translated. "He says it's his responsibility." "He can barely move, Doctor," Foster said gently. "He needs to rest and heal." But Ranger's whining grew louder, more insistent. His front paws scraped against the table as he tried to pull himself up. "Wait," Tommy said suddenly. "He's not trying to come. He's trying to tell us something else." The boy's eyes went wide. "There's another location. The warehouse by the river is just one place. There's another building where he keeps the fighting dogs." Detective Webb cursed under his breath. "2 locations. We'll need to split our teams." "Where's the second location?" he asked Tommy. Tommy closed his eyes, his connection with Ranger visibly deepening. "Old factory, closed down. There's a smokestack that doesn't work anymore. The bad man goes there at night. That's where." Tommy's voice broke. "That's where the really hurt dogs are. The ones that lost fights. He doesn't take care of them. He just leaves them to die." The detective was already on his phone, calling for backup, organizing 2 teams. The sun had fully set now, casting long shadows across the clinic parking lot, where police vehicles were beginning to gather. Sarah held Tommy's hand as they got into Detective Webb's unmarked car. In the back seat, Tommy kept his eyes closed, maintaining his connection with Ranger. "He says to be careful," Tommy whispered. "The bad man has friends. They'll fight back." The warehouse district looked different at night. Shadows stretched between buildings, and the air smelled of rust and river water. Police vehicles surrounded the building with the red door, their lights off to maintain surprise. "Remember," Detective Webb said to Tommy and Sarah, "you stay in the car until I give the all clear, no matter what you hear." Tommy nodded, but his attention was elsewhere. "They're going in," he said, though the police hadn't moved yet. "The dogs can hear them. They're scared." Sure enough, seconds later, the SWAT team moved in. The sound of splintering wood echoed across the empty lot, followed by shouting and the deep, frightened barking of many dogs. Tommy started crying. "They're so scared!" "They think they're going to be hurt again." Sarah held him close, feeling helpless. Through the car window, they could see officers moving in and out of the building. Then, Detective Webb appeared, jogging toward their car. "Building's secure," he said, opening the door. "But the dogs, They're in bad shape, and they won't let anyone near them. We need Tommy." The inside of the warehouse was worse than Sarah had imagined. The smell hit first, a combination of fear, sickness, and neglect that made her stomach turn. Cages lined the walls, stacked 3 high in some places. The barking was deafening, a chorus of terror and confusion. But Tommy walked forward calmly, his small hand outstretched. The barking quieted slightly as he passed each cage, the dogs sensing something different about this tiny human. He stopped at a cage near the back. Inside was a small pit bull puppy, maybe 3 months old, lying on her side and breathing shallowly. "This is her," Tommy said. "The one Ranger tried to save. Her name is Hope." The puppy's eyes were barely open, but when Tommy reached through the bars to touch her, her tail moved slightly. "She's dying," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "She needs Dr. Foster right now." Detective Webb was already calling for the veterinary team to come in, but Tommy had moved to another cage, where a large mastiff with visible fight scars cowered in the corner. "It's okay," Tommy whispered. "The bad man is gone. No more fighting. I promise." The mastiff inched forward, drawn by something in the boy's voice. When Tommy put his hand through the bars, the dog that animal control had warned might be aggressive gently licked his fingers. One by one, Tommy moved through the warehouse, somehow knowing which dogs needed immediate medical attention, which ones were too traumatized to be moved yet, and which ones just needed to hear a kind voice. "This one's pregnant," he said at one cage, surprising the animal control officer who had just examined the dog. "She's hiding it because she's scared they'll take her puppies." An ultrasound later confirmed Tommy was right. "This one has internal bleeding," he said at another cage. "From his last fight. He's hiding how much it hurts." X-rays confirmed that too. By the time they finished the first warehouse and moved to the second location, word had spread through the police force about the boy who could talk to dogs. Officers who had been skeptical were now believers, watching in amazement as Tommy calmed dogs that had tried to bite everyone else. The second location was even worse. The old factory was where Dalton had dumped the dogs he considered worthless, the ones too injured or too old to fight anymore. Many were already dead. The ones still alive were in conditions that made hardened officers cry. Tommy walked through the nightmare with tears streaming down his face, but he didn't stop. He identified which dogs could be saved and which ones were beyond help. For those suffering too much, he sat with them, whispering comfort as doctor. Foster and her team humanely ended their pain. "You're brave," he told each one. "You fought hard. You can rest now. It was past." Midnight when they finally finished. 43 dogs had been rescued from both locations. 7 had to be euthanized. Victor Dalton and 3 accomplices were in custody, though Dalton's lawyer was already arguing that the raid had been based on illegally obtained information. "Let him try to prove a 5-year-old boy is a confidential informant," Detective Webb muttered. Back at the clinic, they found Ranger sitting up, supported by pillows but alert. His tail wagged weakly when he saw Tommy. "We saved them," Tommy told him. "We saved them all." Ranger's eyes seemed to shine with understanding. Then, to everyone's amazement, he moved his back legs. Not much, just a slight shift. But it was voluntary movement where there should have been none. Dr. Foster ran more tests, each one confirming the impossible. Ranger's spinal cord, which had been severed, showed signs of healing that shouldn't happen in dogs or humans. "It's like his body is rewriting the rules of biology," she said, bewildered. "I've never seen anything like it." But Tommy just smiled, his hand on Ranger's head. "He says he has a reason to get better now. He has to help train all the rescued dogs to trust people again." Sarah watched her son, this tiny boy who had somehow become a bridge between two species, and wondered what other impossible things he might accomplish. The night had revealed that Tommy's gift wasn't just imagination or coincidence. It was real, powerful, and perhaps most importantly, it was needed. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, the clinic filled with volunteers who had heard about the rescue. Donations poured in, not just money, but food, blankets, and offers to foster the rescued dogs. Tommy had fallen asleep in a chair beside Ranger, his small hand still touching the dog's paw. Even in sleep, the connection between them was visible, a quiet understanding that transcended words. Sarah knew their lives had changed forever. Her son wasn't just special. He was extraordinary in a way that would bring both wonder and responsibility. But looking at the peaceful expression on his sleeping face, and at Ranger watching over him protectively despite his injuries, she knew they would face whatever came next together. The story of the boy who could talk to dogs had just begun, and already it was changing the world, one rescue at a time. The morning after the raid brought chaos to the Foster Veterinary Clinic. News vans lined the street like soldiers at attention, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky. Reporters from around the country had descended on the small town, all wanting to interview the 5-year-old boy who had led police to the largest dog-fighting ring in state history. Sarah kept the curtains drawn tight in the recovery room, where Tommy sat with Ranger. The German Shepherd had made it through the night, his vital signs stronger than anyone had expected. But it was his legs that had everyone talking. The paralysis, that should have been permanent, was showing signs of reversal that defied medical explanation. "The nerves are regenerating, doctor," Foster said for the 5th time that morning, staring at the test results. "This is impossible. Severed spinal cords don't just heal like this." Tommy looked up from where he was gently massaging Ranger's back legs, something he had started doing without being told. "He says it tingles now, like when your foot falls asleep and starts waking up." Dr. Foster knelt beside them, watching Tommy's small hands work with surprising expertise. "Did someone teach you to do that? The massage technique you're using is exactly what we do in physical therapy." Tommy shook his head. "Ranger shows me where it hurts and where it feels good. I just follow what he tells me." A knock at the door interrupted them. Detective Webb entered, his face grim. "We have a problem." Dalton made bail. Sarah's blood ran cold. "How is that possible? After what he did?" His lawyer argued that all our evidence came from an unreliable source. The detective's jaw tightened. A 5-year-old child claiming to talk to dogs doesn't hold up well in court, apparently. Tommy's hands stilled on Ranger's legs. "He's angry," the boy said quietly. "The bad man." Ranger can feel it. He wants revenge. Detective Webb pulled out his notebook. "Revenge on who?" "On Ranger. On me. On everyone who helped." Tommy's voice was steady, but Sarah could see his hands trembling slightly. "Ranger says he won't stop. He's done this before, hurt people who got in his way." The detective wrote everything down. "We'll post protection. Nobody's going to hurt you or Ranger." But Tommy was shaking his head. "Not just us. The other dogs, the ones we rescued. He knows where they are." "As if on cue, doctor." Foster's phone rang. She answered, her face paling as she listened. "There's been an incident at the emergency animal shelter. Someone tried to break in last night. The security guard scared them off, but what?" Sarah demanded. "They left a message, spray painted on the wall." Dr. Foster showed them a photo on her phone. The words, "Give them back or the boy pays," were scrawled in red paint across the shelter's entrance. Sarah pulled Tommy closer. "We're leaving town. Today." "No, Mama." Tommy's voice was firm. "We can't leave the dogs. They need us." "Tommy, this is dangerous. Ranger says Dalton has more dogs." Tommy interrupted, his eyes unfocused as he received information only he could hear. "Fighting dogs he kept at a 3rd location. If we leave, he'll just start over somewhere else." Detective Webb leaned forward. "A 3rd location? Where?" Tommy closed his eyes, his hand tightening on Ranger's paw. The German Shepherd's breathing changed, becoming deeper, more rhythmic, as if he was concentrating too. "Underground," Tommy said finally. "Ranger never went there, but he heard the other dogs talking about it. They called it the pit. It's where the championship fights. Happen, where the real money is made." The detective's expression darkened. "We've heard rumors about an underground fighting championship, but we've never been able to locate it. Ranger says it moves, different places each time, but there's a fight tonight." Tommy's eyes opened, filled with urgency. "The dogs there, they're not like the ones we rescued. They've been turned into weapons. They don't remember how to be gentle anymore." Dr. Foster spoke up. "Even if we find these dogs, rehabilitating them would be nearly impossible. Dogs trained for that level of violence." "They can be saved," Tommy insisted. "Ranger says every dog can remember love. It just takes time and the right person to remind them." Sarah wanted to argue. to grab her son and run far from this nightmare. But looking at his determined face, she knew he wouldn't leave. Whatever gift he had, he felt responsible for using it. "What do you need?" she asked quietly. Tommy looked surprised, then grateful. "I need to get stronger. The connection with Ranger is hard sometimes. It makes my head hurt. But if I practice, maybe I can reach the other dogs from farther away." Over the next 2 days, while police protection surrounded the clinic, Tommy worked on strengthening his ability. He would sit with different rescued dogs, learning to understand their unique ways of communicating. Each animal was different. Some shared images, others emotions, and a few seemed to transmit actual thoughts. Hope, the sick puppy from the warehouse, was recovering in an incubator nearby. Tommy spent hours with her, their connection different from what he had with Ranger. Where Ranger's communication was clear and deliberate, Hope's was chaotic, filled with fear and confusion. "She doesn't understand why humans hurt her," Tommy explained to Dr. Foster. "She keeps asking what she did wrong." "Nothing," Dr. Foster said firmly. "She did nothing wrong. I know that, but she doesn't. She thinks if she could just be good enough, the pain would stop." Tommy's eyes filled with tears. That's what all the fighting dogs think. That they deserve it somehow. It was during one of these sessions that Tommy made a breakthrough. He was sitting between Ranger and Hope when suddenly his whole body went rigid. His eyes rolled back, and for a terrifying moment, Sarah thought he was having a seizure. "Tommy!" She rushed to him, but Dr. Foster held her back. "Wait, look at the dogs." Both Ranger and Hope were in the same rigid state, their eyes unfocused. The three of them stayed like that for nearly 30 seconds before Tommy gasped, coming back to himself. "I saw it," he whispered. "The pit." Through the eyes of a dog who's there right now. Detective Webb, who had been stationed at the clinic, immediately came over. "What did you see?" "Concrete walls. No windows. The smell of blood and fear. There's music playing to cover the sound of the fights. Latin music. And I saw a sign reflected in a puddle of water. Paradise. Auto body." The detective was already on his phone, relaying the information. Within minutes, they had a location. Paradise Auto Body was a shop on the south side of town, owned by one of Dalton's known associates. "The fight is tonight," Tommy said urgently. "Midnight. There are 12 dogs there. 3 are supposed to fight to the death." Sarah's stomach turned. "To the death?" Detective Webb nodded grimly. "Championship fights. Winners take home thousands. The dogs that lose..." He didn't finish. "We have to stop it," Tommy said. "But it's going to be dangerous. These aren't like the scared dogs in the warehouse. These dogs have been taught that humans mean fighting. They'll attack anyone who tries to help them." "Then we go in with animal control and tranquilizers," the detective suggested. But Tommy was shaking his head. "No, if you tranquilize them, they'll wake up more scared and angry. They need to choose to trust again. I need to be there." "Absolutely not," Sarah said immediately. "Tommy, these are killer dogs." "No," Tommy said firmly. "They're dogs who were taught to kill. There's a difference. Ranger says every dog remembers being a puppy. Every dog remembers playing and being loved, even if it was just for a moment. I can help them remember." The argument went on for hours. Sarah refused to let Tommy anywhere near the fighting ring. Detective Webb insisted it was too dangerous. Dr. Foster worried about the psychological impact on a 5-year-old. But as night fell, Ranger did something that changed everything. The German Shepherd, who hadn't been able to stand since his injury, suddenly pulled himself up on shaking legs. It lasted only a few seconds before he collapsed, but the message was clear. "He says he's going with or without us," Tommy translated. "These dogs are his responsibility. He was supposed to be a fighting dog once, before he escaped. He knows what they're going through." Sarah looked at her son, at the determination in his young face, and made a decision that went against every protective instinct she had. "If we do this," she said slowly, "we do it my way. Full police protection. The moment anything goes wrong, we leave. And you don't go anywhere near those dogs until they're secured." Tommy nodded eagerly. "Ranger says thank you. He says you're brave, Mama." Sarah laughed bitterly. "I'm not brave. I'm terrified. But I'm more terrified of what you'll do if I try to stop you." The plan was complex. Police would raid the fighting ring at 11:45, just before the main event started. Tommy would wait in a secure vehicle until the building was cleared. Only then would he be allowed to approach the dogs, and only with full protection. But plans rarely survive contact with reality. At 11:30, as they sat in Detective Webb's car 3 blocks from Paradise Auto Body, Tommy suddenly grabbed his head in pain. "Something's wrong," he gasped. "The dogs are already fighting." They started early. The detective radioed the information to his team, but Tommy was shaking his head frantically. "No, you don't understand." One of the dogs, a female pit bull named Mercy, she's refusing to fight. They're going to kill her as an example to the others. Without thinking, Tommy opened the car door and ran. Sarah screamed, chasing after him, but her 5-year-old son was surprisingly fast when motivated. Detective Webb radioed for all units to move in immediately as he joined the pursuit. Tommy reached the auto body shop just as the SWAT team was preparing to breach. The sound of barking and shouting came from inside, along with something else that made Sarah's blood freeze, the sound of a dog screaming in pain. "Now!" Detective Webb shouted into his radio. "Go now!" The door exploded inward. Police flooded the building. Tommy darted between them before anyone could stop him, following some internal compass toward the sound of distress. The scene in the basement was from a nightmare. A makeshift arena had been constructed from shipping pallets and chain-link fence. Blood stained the concrete floor. In the center, a scarred pit bull lay motionless while another dog, massive and muscled, stood over her, jaws ready to deliver a killing bite. "Stop!" Tommy's voice rang out with an authority that seemed impossible from such a small child. Everything froze. The attacking dog looked up, confused. The crowd of spectators, mostly men with cash in their hands, turned to stare. Police officers aimed their weapons, unsure what to do. Tommy walked into the arena. "Tommy, no!" Sarah screamed, but her son didn't stop. He approached the aggressive dog slowly, his hands visible, his voice steady. "Your name is Thor," he said to the massive pit bull. "You weren't always like this. You remember your mother. She was gentle. She cleaned your face when you were small." The dog's head tilted, his aggressive stance wavering. "You had a boy once," Tommy continued, moving closer. "Before the bad men took you. He called you Buddy. He threw a red ball for you in a yard with yellow flowers." Thor's tail, which had been rigid with aggression, drooped. A whine escaped his throat. "You don't want to hurt her," Tommy said, now close enough to touch the dog. "You never wanted to hurt any of them. They made you, but you can choose now. You can choose to be Buddy again instead of Thor." The massive dog looked down at the injured female, then back at Tommy. Slowly, incredibly, he stepped away from his victim and pressed his huge head against Tommy's small chest. The basement erupted in chaos. Spectators tried to flee but met police officers at every exit. Other dogs in cages around the room began barking frantically. But Tommy stood calm in the center of it all, his arms around the neck of a dog that had been seconds away from killing. "Good boy," he whispered. "Good buddy." Sarah finally reached her son, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you ever do that again," she sobbed, pulling him close while trying not to disturb the massive dog still pressed against him. "I had to, Mama," Tommy said simply. Mercy was dying. Dr. Foster and her team arrived with animal ambulances. The injured female, Mercy, was critical but alive. The other dogs were more complicated. Years of training had turned them into weapons, and they responded to any approach with aggression. But Tommy seemed to know exactly how to reach each one. He moved from cage to cage, speaking in that same calm, certain voice. "Your name is Duke. You like bacon. Your first owner was an old man who shared his breakfast with you. Your name is Bella. You're scared of thunder. Someone used to hold you during storms. Your name is Max. You had puppies once. You were a good mother before they took them away." Each dog responded differently. Some immediately calmed. Others took longer, requiring Tommy to sit by their cages for long minutes, sharing their pain before they would trust. By dawn, all 12 dogs had been safely transported to a special rehabilitation facility. Victor Dalton was arrested at the scene, caught with cash and betting slips that proved his involvement. This time, with physical evidence beyond Tommy's testimony, bail was denied. But the victory felt hollow as Tommy collapsed in the car on the way back to the clinic. his small body finally overwhelmed by the night's events. "Hospital," Sarah demanded, but Tommy shook his head weakly. "Ranger," he whispered. "Need to see Ranger." At the clinic, they found Ranger standing, not for long and not steadily, but standing on all four legs. Dr. Foster was documenting everything, her hands shaking with excitement. "It's unprecedented," she kept saying. "Complete spinal recovery doesn't happen." Tommy smiled weakly from where Sarah carried him. He says he had to get better, to help the fighting dogs remember how to be normal dogs again. Over the next week, as news of the fighting ring bust spread nationally, the clinic became a pilgrimage site. Families who had lost dogs to fighting rings came to see the boy who could speak to animals. Animal rights activists wanted to study his abilities. Scientists wanted to test him. Sarah protected Tommy fiercely, limiting his interactions to a few hours a day. But those hours were remarkable. Tommy worked with each of the rescued fighting dogs, somehow knowing exactly what each one needed to hear to begin healing. Thor, the massive pit bull who had almost killed Mercy, became Tommy's biggest success story. Within days, the dog that professional trainers had declared irredeemable was playing gently with toys, his tail wagging at the sight of humans. He wasn't a monster, Tommy explained to a documentary crew the doctor Foster had allowed to film. He was just lost. He forgot who he was supposed to be, but dogs never really forget love. They just need someone to remind them. The documentary, when it aired weeks later, would spark a national conversation about dog fighting and rehabilitation. But, in the moment, Tommy was just a tired 5-year-old boy who wanted to play with his friend. Ranger's recovery continued to astound everyone. He was walking now, short distances with a slight limp, but walking nonetheless. The paralysis that should have been permanent had reversed almost completely. "He says he had help," Tommy told Dr. Foster one day. "Help? From who?" Tommy looked confused. "From all of them, all the dogs we saved. They send him strength, like how people pray for each other, but different." Dr. Foster didn't know what to make of that, but she couldn't argue with the results. Ranger was healing at a rate that challenged everything she knew about veterinary medicine. It was Hope, the puppy from the warehouse, who revealed the next piece of the puzzle. She had recovered enough to leave the incubator and was starting to play like a normal puppy when Tommy suddenly announced she had something important to share. "She remembers more about the warehouse," Tommy said, his expression serious. "About other people who came there. People who bought dogs for fighting." Detective Webb, who had become a regular at the clinic, immediately took interest. "Can she identify them?" Tommy closed his eyes, connecting with Hope. "A woman with red hair and a scar on her hand. She bought 2 puppies last month. A man with a gold tooth who smells like cigarettes. He has a tattoo of a scorpion on his wrist." Each description led to another arrest. Hope's memories, filtered through Tommy's gift, became evidence in an expanding investigation that reached 3 states. But it was Mercy, the female pit bull who had refused to fight, who provided the most shocking revelation. Tommy was sitting with her one afternoon, helping her learn to trust humans again, when he suddenly went very still. "Mama," he called, his voice strange. "Mama, come here." Sarah rushed over, alarmed by his tone. "What is it?" "Mercy knows about another boy, a boy like me." Sarah's blood chilled. "What do you mean, like you?" Tommy's eyes were wide with wonder and fear. "A boy who can talk to dogs. The bad men have him. They use him to train the fighters, to make them meaner. His name is Luis. He's 8 years old." Detective Webb was called immediately. The information Tommy provided through Mercy's memories was specific. Luis Martinez had been reported missing 6 months ago from a town 200 miles away. His parents had mentioned he had an unusual connection with animals, but nobody had taken it seriously. "They force him to tell the dogs to fight," Tommy explained, tears running down his face. "He doesn't want to, but they hurt him if he doesn't." The dogs don't want to hurt each other, but when Luis tells them to, they think they have to. The revelation changed everything. This wasn't just about dog fighting anymore. It was about kidnapping, child abuse, and the exploitation of a gift that science was only beginning to understand. "We have to find him," Tommy insisted. "Mercy says he's getting weaker. Sometimes he can't make the connection anymore, and then they hurt him worse." The search for Luis became a priority. Using information from Mercy and the other rescued dogs, police pieced together a network that was larger and more organized than anyone had imagined. Dogfighting was just one part of it. There was also trafficking in exotic animals, illegal breeding operations, and now, apparently, the exploitation of children with special abilities. Tommy threw himself into the search with an intensity that worried Sarah. He would sit for hours with different rescued dogs, searching their memories for any clue about Luis's location. The effort was taking a toll. He was losing weight, getting headaches, and sometimes his nose would bleed after particularly intense sessions. "You need to rest, Doctor," Foster told him firmly after finding him passed out beside Mercy's kennel one evening. "I can't," Tommy whispered. "Luis is running out of time. I can feel him sometimes, like an echo. He's so scared." It was Ranger who finally provided the breakthrough. The German Shepherd had been restless all day, pacing despite his still healing legs. That night, he woke everyone with urgent barking. Tommy rushed to him, placing his hands on Ranger's head. The connection was immediate and overwhelming. Tommy's eyes rolled back, his body going rigid as information flooded through him. When he came back to himself, he was crying. "I saw him, Luis, through the eyes of a dog at another fight. He's in a barn, red with white trim. There's a windmill nearby that doesn't work anymore. The dog could smell cows from a dairy farm close by." Detective Webb had the description out to every law enforcement agency within minutes. By morning, they had 3 possible locations matching the description. By noon, they had found the right one. The raid on the barn was coordinated across multiple agencies. Tommy wanted to go, insisted he needed to be there for Luis, but this time, Sarah put her foot down. The compromise was that Tommy would wait at a nearby police station, ready to help once the scene was secure. The wait was agony. Tommy paced like Ranger had, the connection between him and the German Shepherd allowing them to share their anxiety. Then suddenly, Tommy gasped. "They found him," he whispered. "Luis, he's alive." The 8-year-old boy they brought to the station looked nothing like the school photo his parents had provided. He was thin, hollow-eyed, with bruises visible on his arms. But when he saw Tommy, something sparked in his expression. "You're like me," Luis said, his voice hoarse from disuse. Tommy nodded, reaching out to take the older boy's hand. "The dogs told me about you. They said you tried to protect them even when the bad men hurt you." Luis broke down crying. "I couldn't stop it. They made me make the dogs fight. I could feel their pain every time." "It's not your fault," Tommy said firmly. "The dogs know that. They don't blame you." The reunion between Luis and his parents was emotional but complicated. The boy had been through trauma that would take years to process, but he wasn't alone anymore. He had Tommy, someone who understood his gift and the burden it carried. Dr. Foster, who had become something of an expert on children with animal communication abilities, began working with both boys. She brought in Dr. Rebecca Winters, a child psychologist, and Professor Alan Kumar, who studied human-animal bonds. "What you boys have is extraordinary," Professor Kumar explained. "Throughout history, there have been stories of people who could communicate with animals. Most were dismissed as myth, but you're proving that it's real." "Why us?" Luis asked. "Why can we do this when others can't?" The professor shook his head. "We don't know yet. Brain scans show unusual activity in your temporal lobes when you're connecting with animals. But whether this is genetic, environmental, or something else entirely, we simply don't understand." Tommy didn't care about the science. He cared about the dogs that still needed help. With Luis now helping, their ability to reach traumatized animals doubled. Dogs that had been considered hopeless began to show signs of recovery. Thor, the fighting dog Tommy had saved, became a therapy dog, visiting hospitals with Tommy to help sick children. His transformation from killer to healer became a symbol of redemption that touched hearts nationwide. Mercy, despite her injuries, was adopted by a family who had followed her story from the beginning. She would never fully recover physically, but her spirit remained unbroken. Hope, the puppy who had been so close to death, grew strong and playful. She was adopted by Sophie, the little girl from the warehouse, whose mother had moved to town specifically so her daughter could be near the dogs she had tried to save. And Ranger, the German Shepherd who had started it all, continued to defy medical explanation. His recovery was complete enough that he could run, though with a distinctive gait, that doctor. Foster called his warrior's stride. "He says he's not done yet," Tommy told Sarah one evening as they watched Ranger play with the other rescued dogs in the clinic's yard. "He says there are more dogs out there who need help." Sarah sighed, knowing their lives would never be normal again. Her son had a gift that came with responsibility. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she said. Tommy hugged her. "Ranger promises to protect me, and I promise to protect him." As the sun set over the clinic, casting long shadows across the yard where rescued dogs played and healed, Tommy sat with Ranger and Luis, planning their next rescue. The boy who could talk to dogs had become something more than anyone had imagined, a bridge between species, a voice for the voiceless, and a reminder that even the most damaged souls could heal with love and understanding. The fighting rings were being dismantled one by one. The network that had seemed so powerful was crumbling under the weight of testimony from two boys and the dogs they could understand. Change was coming, slow but certain, one rescue at a time. But there were still mysteries to uncover, still dogs to save, and still truths to reveal about the connection between humans and animals that science was only beginning to understand. Tommy's journey was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. The rehabilitation center that had been hastily established to house all the rescued fighting dogs was unlike anything the veterinary world had seen before. 3 weeks after the barn raid that had saved Luis, the facility housed over 100 dogs in various stages of recovery. Tommy and Luis spent every afternoon there, working with animals that professional trainers had declared hopeless. "This one's name is Scar," Luis said, approaching a cage where a massive Rottweiler mix cowered in the corner. "He's been here since the first raid, but he won't let anyone near him." Tommy joined Luis at the cage, both boys sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor, their eyes unfocused as they reached out with their gift, connecting to the traumatized dog's mind. "He had a daughter," Tommy whispered after a moment, "a little girl who used to dress him up in tutus and have tea parties with him. Before the bad men took him." Luis nodded, tears streaming down his face. "He's showing me the same thing, pink ribbons and plastic teacups. Her name was Emma." Dr. Foster, who had been documenting their sessions, made rapid notes. The boys' abilities seemed to amplify when they worked together, allowing them to reach dogs that neither could connect with alone. "Can we find her?" Tommy asked, turning to Detective Webb, who had become a permanent fixture at the rehabilitation center. "Emma, can we find his family?" The detective nodded, already pulling out his phone. "If you can give me more details, we'll try." Through Scar's memories, the boys provided a description of a house with a blue door, a specific type of swing set in the backyard, and the sound of train tracks nearby. Within hours, Detective Webb's team had located the family. The Johnsons had reported their dog, originally named Teddy, stolen 2 years ago. Their daughter Emma, now 7, had never stopped asking when Teddy was coming home. The reunion was set for the next day, but there was a problem. Scar, Teddy, had been so traumatized by his time in the fighting rings that he showed extreme aggression toward everyone except Tommy and Luis. "We need to help him remember," Tommy said with determination. "Before Emma gets here, he needs to remember who he really is." That night, Tommy and Luis stayed at the center with special permission from their parents. They sat with Teddy for hours, sharing his memories back with him, reminding him of gentleness and love. Ranger stayed with them, his presence seeming to calm the other dog. "Remember the tea parties," Tommy whispered. "Remember how careful you were not to knock over her tiny cups." "Remember how she'd read you stories," Luis added. Even though she couldn't really read yet, she'd make up words looking at the pictures. Slowly, something shifted in Teddy's eyes. The hardness that had kept him alive in the fighting rings began to soften. When he finally slept, his body relaxed for the first time since his rescue. The next morning, when a car pulled up to the rehabilitation center, Teddy's head shot up. He could smell something familiar on the wind. Tommy and Luis stood with him, their hands on his scarred sides, feeling his recognition and conflict. "It's okay to be Teddy again," Tommy told him. "You can let Scar go." The car door opened, and a little girl with blonde pigtails stepped out. She was clutching a worn stuffed animal, a dog that looked remarkably like Teddy had before the scars. "Emma can't run to him," her mother was saying. "The doctor said he might be dangerous." But Emma wasn't listening. She had seen her dog, and nothing else mattered. "Teddy!" she screamed, breaking free from her mother's grasp. Everyone tensed. Dr. Foster stepped forward to intervene, but Tommy held up his hand. "Wait," he said. "Look." Teddy was transforming before their eyes. His aggressive stance melted away. His tail, which hadn't wagged once since his rescue, began moving hesitantly. And when Emma reached the fence, calling his name over and over, he did something that made everyone cry. He play-bowed, just like he used to when inviting Emma to play. "He remembers," Louise whispered in awe. "He remembers everything." The reunion was cautious at first. Emma's parents were terrified, but Emma herself showed no fear. She sat on the ground, talking to Teddy through the fence about everything he had missed. Her first grade teacher, her new bike, how she had kept his bowl in the same spot, waiting for him to come home. Within an hour, Teddy was licking Emma's fingers through the fence. Within a week, he was ready to go home, his rehabilitation accelerated by the presence of the little girl who had never stopped loving him. The success with Teddy opened new possibilities. Tommy and Louise began working to reconnect other stolen dogs with their original families. Each reunion was a victory, but it also revealed the vast scope of the dog-fighting network they were dismantling. It was during one of these sessions that Tommy made a disturbing discovery. He was working with a young pit bull named Rosie, when suddenly he jerked back, his face pale. "There's another place," he gasped, "bigger than all the others. Rosie saw it before she was brought here. It's not just dogs." Luis connected with Rosie too, and his face went white. "I see it. It's like a prison for animals. Dogs, roosters, even some exotic animals. And there are more kids like us." Detective Webb immediately called for backup while the boys tried to extract more information from Rosie's traumatic memories. "It's underground," Tommy said, his nose beginning to bleed from the effort. "Really underground, like an old subway tunnel or something. There are hundreds of cages." "The kids," Luis added, swaying slightly. "There are at least 3 of them. They're younger than me. The bad men make them control the animals for shows. Rich people come to watch," Dr. Foster intervened, worried about the toll this was taking on both boys. "That's enough for now. You need to rest," but Tommy shook his head. "One more thing. Rosie knows when the next show is. Tomorrow night, midnight." The information sparked the largest coordinated raid in state history. FBI, ATF, local police, and animal welfare organizations joined forces. Tommy and Luis were absolutely forbidden from being anywhere near the operation, but they found another way to help. "We can reach them," Tommy explained to his mother. "The kids. If they have the same gift we do, we can connect with them through the animals." Sarah wanted to say no, but she saw the determination in her son's eyes. These were children like him, children who were being forced to use their gift for cruelty. "How?" she asked. "Ranger," Tommy said simply. "He's strong enough now. He can help us reach further than we ever could alone." That night, as the raid teams prepared to storm the underground facility, Tommy, Luis, and Ranger sat in a circle at the rehabilitation center. They held hands, the boys' free hands resting on Ranger's fur. Dr. Foster and Dr. Winters monitored them, ready to intervene if necessary. Tommy felt his consciousness expand, flowing through Ranger and out into the world. He could sense every dog for miles, but he pushed further, searching for the concentration of pain and fear that would mark the underground prison. He found it just as the raid began. Hundreds of animals in distress, their terror overwhelming. But among them, 3 small lights of human consciousness, all young, all frightened, all gifted like him. "I found them," he whispered. "Maria, she's 6. Jin, he's 7. And Aisha, she's only 4. Through the animals' eyes, Tommy and Luis watched the raid unfold. They saw the moment the children were found, huddled together in a locked room. They felt the animals' confusion as strangers flooded their prison. "Tell them we're safe now," Tommy said, not to anyone in the room, but to the 3 children miles away. "Tell them the bad men can't hurt them anymore." Somehow, impossibly, the message got through. Maria, the oldest of the 3, looked directly at a dog that was watching her and nodded. The raid was a complete success. 300 animals were rescued, along with the 3 gifted children. The underground facility was revealed to be the hub of a multi-million-dollar operation that had connections in 12 states. When the children were brought to the rehabilitation center the next day, The meeting was electric. Maria, Jin, and Aisha recognized Tommy and Luis immediately, not by sight, but by the feeling of their gifts. "You're the ones who talk to us," Maria said in accented English. "Through the dogs." Tommy nodded, smiling. "We're like you. We understand them too." 4-year-old Aisha, who hadn't spoken since her rescue, walked straight to Ranger and wrapped her tiny arms around his neck. "Pretty dog," she whispered, her first words in months. Ranger's tail wagged as he gently licked her face, and Tommy felt the German shepherd's joy at being able to comfort another traumatized child. The 5 children began working together, their combined abilities creating something unprecedented. Dogs that had been catatonic with trauma began responding. Animals that had shown nothing but aggression started playing. The rehabilitation center became a place of miracles, documented by researchers from around the world. Professor Kumar brought in a team of neuroscientists who studied the children's brain patterns when they connected with animals. The results challenged everything science thought it knew about interspecies communication. "They're not just reading body language or picking up on subtle cues," Professor Kumar explained at a press conference. "These children are actually accessing the consciousness of these animals. It's telepathy, for lack of a better word." The revelation sparked global interest. Suddenly, Tommy and the others weren't just curiosities. They were proof that humans and animals could communicate in ways previously thought impossible. But with fame came danger. Not everyone was happy about the dog fighting networks being destroyed. Threats began arriving at the rehabilitation center. Someone tried to break into Sarah's house. Luis's family reported being followed. It was Ranger who sensed the real danger first. One evening, he became extremely agitated, barking and pacing despite Tommy's attempts to calm him. "Something's coming," Tommy translated, his face pale. "Tonight, they want to hurt the dogs and us to send a message." Detective Webb took the threat seriously. Police protection was increased, but Tommy shook his head. "It's not enough. Ranger says there are too many of them." "How many?" Webb asked. Tommy's eyes widened. 20 men. They're angry about losing money. They want to burn down the center with all the dogs inside." The evacuation began immediately. Volunteers rushed to move the dogs to temporary shelters. The children were taken to a safe house. But Tommy refused to leave Ranger. "We need to stay," he insisted. "Ranger has a plan." Sarah wanted to argue, but she had learned to trust her son's gift. "What kind of plan?" Tommy's expression was grim. "The dogs want to protect us this time. All of them, even the ones who were taught to fight. They want to show that they choose to protect, not hurt." As midnight approached, the rehabilitation center looked empty. The lights were off, the parking lot deserted, but hidden throughout the building and grounds were over 100 dogs, all connected. Through Tommy and the other children's gift, all waiting. The attackers came just after midnight, 20 men with gas cans and weapons, expecting no resistance. They got the surprise of their lives. As they approached the building, every dog began howling at once. The sound was otherworldly, carrying for miles. Lights flashed on in houses throughout the neighborhood. People came out to see what was happening. The attackers hesitated, and in that moment of uncertainty, the dogs acted. They didn't attack. Tommy and the children had made sure of that. Instead, they surrounded the men, hundreds of dogs moving in perfect coordination, creating an unbreakable circle. "Nobody move!" Detective Webb's voice boomed through a megaphone. Police had been waiting, using the dogs as an early warning system. The arrest of all 20 conspirators made national news. But more importantly, it showed the world that the rescued fighting dogs had chosen to protect rather than attack. They had been given the chance to be violent, and they had chosen peace. The story went viral globally. Donations poured in to create a permanent rehabilitation facility. Laws were passed increasing penalties for dog fighting, and most importantly, a network was established to identify and protect children with animal communication gifts. 6 months later, the new facility was officially opened. It wasn't just a rehabilitation center anymore. It was a school where gifted children could learn to use their abilities to help animals, and where traumatized animals could heal with the help of humans who truly understood them. Tommy stood at the opening ceremony, Ranger by his side. The German Shepherd walked without a limp now, his recovery complete in a way that still baffled medical science. Around them were hundreds of dogs that had been rescued from fighting rings, all of them now either reunited with families or adopted into loving homes. "My name is Tommy Chen," he said into the microphone, his voice clear and strong despite his young age. "6 months ago, I heard a dog crying in a marketplace. That dog was Ranger, and he changed my life." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. People ask me what it's like to talk to dogs. The truth is, dogs don't use words. They share feelings, memories, and love. Every dog we rescued had love inside them, even after everything humans did to them. They just needed someone to remind them of it. He looked at Luis, Maria, Jin, and Aisha, who stood with their own rescued dogs. We're not special because we can hear them. We're lucky because they trust us enough to share their hearts with us. The audience erupted in applause, but Tommy wasn't finished. There are still dogs out there who need help. There are still fighting rings to shut down. And there are probably other kids like us who are being forced to use their gift for bad things. We're not going to stop until every dog is safe and every child is free. Ranger barked once, as if in agreement, and the crowd laughed through their tears. Dr. Foster took the microphone next. The Tommy Chen Foundation for Animal Communication and Rehabilitation is now officially open. We've already identified 12 more children with gifts similar to Tommy's, and we're working to create a network of facilities across the country. She paused, looking at the crowd of reporters, researchers, and animal lovers. What we've learned here challenges everything we thought we knew about the relationship between humans and animals. These children are proving that the bond between species is deeper and more profound than we ever imagined. As the ceremony continued, Tommy slipped away with Ranger to a quiet spot behind the building. They sat together, boy and dog, looking out at the field where rescued dogs were playing together in the sunshine. "We did it," Tommy whispered. "We saved them all." Ranger leaned against him, and Tommy felt the dog's response not in words but in pure emotion, pride, love, and determination to keep fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. A year later, Tommy's story had inspired change around the world. Countries that had never had animal cruelty laws began passing them. The network of gifted children had grown to include kids from every continent, all connected through their ability to understand animals. Luis had started working with police departments, helping to solve cases of animal abuse that would have gone undetected. Maria focused on zoo animals, helping to improve conditions for creatures in captivity. Jin worked with wildlife, using his gift to help researchers understand migration, patterns, and animal behavior. Little Aisha, despite her young age, had become famous for her ability to calm the most traumatized animals with just her presence. But it was Tommy and Ranger who remained at the heart of it all. They traveled to schools, teaching children that every animal deserved respect and love. They visited hospitals where Ranger's presence and Tommy's gift helped sick children find comfort. They worked with veterans suffering from PTSD, showing them that healing was possible even after the worst trauma. One evening, as Tommy sat in his room doing homework, he was in first grade now and learning to read, Ranger suddenly stood up, alert. "What is it, boy?" Tommy asked, immediately connecting with his friend. Through Ranger's enhanced senses, Tommy could hear it. A faint whimpering from somewhere in the neighborhood. Another dog in distress. Tommy smiled. "Let's go tell Mom. We've got work to do." As they headed downstairs, Tommy reflected on how much had changed since that day at the marketplace. He had discovered his gift, saved hundreds of dogs, helped rescue kidnapped children, and inspired a global movement. But most importantly, he had learned that the connection between humans and animals was sacred, something that could heal the deepest wounds and bridge the widest gaps. "You know what, Ranger?" Tommy said as they found Sarah in the kitchen. "I think this is just the beginning." Ranger barked in agreement, his tail wagging with the joy of a dog who had found his purpose. Sarah looked at them both, seeing the determination in their eyes. "Another rescue?" Tommy nodded. "Always another rescue, Mama. Until every dog is safe." She sighed but smiled. "Let me get my keys." As they prepared for another rescue, another adventure, another chance to save a life, Tommy thought about all the dogs still out there waiting for help, all the children who might have gifts they didn't understand, all the connections waiting to be made between humans and animals. The work would never truly be done, but that was okay. As long as he had Ranger by his side and the support of his growing family of gifted children and rescued animals, Tommy knew they could face anything. The boy who could talk to dogs had become something more. a voice for the voiceless, a bridge between species, and a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever looked into an animal's eyes and wondered what they were thinking. His story had touched millions, inspired countless rescues, and proven that the bond between a child and a dog could literally change the world. But for Tommy, it all came back to that moment in the marketplace when he had locked eyes with a paralyzed German shepherd and known, without doubt, that they were meant to save each other. Years later, when people would ask him about his gift, Tommy would always say the same thing. Everyone can talk to animals. You just have to listen with your heart instead of your ears. They're always trying to tell us something. Most people just forget how to hear them. And Ranger, gray-muzzled but still strong, would always be there beside him, living proof that love could heal any wound, bridge any gap, and create miracles that science could never fully explain. The rehabilitation center that had started as an emergency response to a crisis had become a global model for animal welfare. Graduates of the program, both human and animal, had gone on to create their own centers, spreading the message that every creature deserved compassion and understanding. Tommy's gift had shown the world that animals weren't just pets or property. They were conscious beings with memories, emotions, and the capacity for both trauma and healing. His work with the other gifted children had proven that the connection between humans and animals was more profound than anyone had imagined. But perhaps most importantly, Tommy and Ranger's story had reminded people of a simple truth: that love, genuine and unconditional love, could overcome any obstacle. A paralyzed dog had dragged himself to a marketplace to save puppies. A 5-year-old boy had stood up to violent criminals to save dogs. Together, they had sparked a revolution in how humanity saw its relationship with animals. As the sun set on another day at the rehabilitation center, Tommy stood with Ranger, Luis, Maria, Jin, and Aisha watching the rescued dogs play in the yard. Each dog had a story of pain, but also of redemption. Each child had a gift that had once seemed like a burden, but had become a blessing. "We really did it," Luis said, his arm around his own rescued dog, a former fighter named Goliath, who now worked as a therapy dog in children's hospitals. "We're not done yet," Tommy replied, but he was smiling. "There's always more work to do." Aisha, now 6 and talking regularly, piped up. "But that's good, right? It means we'll always be together, helping dogs." Tommy looked at his unlikely family, children brought together by trauma and gift, dogs saved from violence and neglect, adults who had learned to believe in the impossible, and nodded. "Yeah," he said, scratching Ranger behind the ears. "It means we'll always be together." Ranger barked once, and every dog in the yard joined in, their voices rising in a chorus that spoke of freedom, healing, and hope. It was a sound that had once meant fear in fighting rings, but now meant joy in a place of safety. The boy who could talk to dogs had found his purpose, and in doing so, had helped countless others, both human and animal, find theirs. The marketplace discovery that had started with tears had become a movement of love, one rescue at a time, one connection at a time, one miracle at a time. And it all started because a 5-year-old boy had the courage to listen when a broken dog called for help, and the wisdom to know that saving others was the best way to save yourself. The story of Tommy and Ranger would be told for generations, inspiring countless children to listen more carefully to the animals around them, to treat them with kindness and respect, and to remember that sometimes the smallest voice, whether it belongs to a child or a dog, can change the world. If this incredible story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with everyone you know. Every share could help save a dog in need, or inspire someone to listen more carefully to the animals in their life. Leave a comment below telling us about your own special connection with an animal. We read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another amazing true story of the incredible bond between humans and animals. Remember, somewhere out there, a dog might be waiting for someone just like you to hear their call for help. Together, we can make a difference, one rescue at a time.